I think you're on the right path in that you're not doing this as a theory. You're not a guy on a podium saying, "Oh, this is the way it has to be done," and you're pointing your finger. So you're
Yeah.
actually applying what you've learned into your builds. And that's the
Yeah.
important thing, that you are building. And I'm excited about the idea that you've got these two communities, because they become, in essence, your proof of concept. And at the
Oh,
same
yeah.
time, as you're
Yeah.
inviting build, because you're open to say, "Hey, you want to see what we're doing? Come on down and we'll show you what we're doing here." So now you get the builders excited. And then once your people actually move in, espouse the benefits of living in your home. I think that's how it all comes
Yeah.
together.
We got projects in Miami. Okay. These are trailblazers that the industry understand that what I'm doing, right? And so they're hiring me on as a project manager. We've got projects in Miami, Boca Raton, Jupiter, Florida, several projects in Austin, Texas, California, Arizona, Ohio. These healthy homes, these are performance homes.
Yeah.
These are homes that obviously the primary focus is around health, but by default, you're going to build a performance product that's far superior. And again, people across the nation are seeing this, and that's why I'm really excited to be working with all these contractors to start getting these Senergy360 certified homes across the nation. So this isn't just Arizona or California. This is nationwide.
Welcome to the Builder Straight Talk podcast with your host, Michael Creso. Get the unfiltered truth from the trenches of construction, real estate, and funding. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.
Mr. Brian Johnson, I want to thank you for being on the call today. Before we get started, I just want to let you know, as a tribute to you, I went through my Grizzly Adams limited edition collection to find this shirt, because I thought, getting back to nature and everything else, I'm wearing my hemp socks just so we can get this dialed into this whole holistic theme. And I haven't shaved again in commemoration of our time together. So I hope you appreciate all the effort that's gone in here.
It's all good.
Okay.
Absolutely. Happy to be here, Michael.
Well,
And
Brian,
thank you
let's
for
start
having
off
me.
with, tell our audience here. I'm sure there's at least two people that are dialed in. And remember, builders primarily is the people that are listening in. Give them a bit of your backstory, and then we'll cue it up to why we're actually having this conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. I come from the lumber industry back in probably early 90s to late 90s. And, I was actually a certified lumber grader for grading, structural lumber for framing materials and home building. And so I was always fascinated to kind of merge into the construction industry, but I also had a fascination with concrete. I had a joy and a passion for concrete. And in 2002, I became licensed in the state of California as a licensed general contractor. I synced up with a mentor of mine that was building ICF, insulated concrete form construction, which is these big Lego blocks, and I was so fascinated with that back in that time. And I thought, hey, this is it. I'm just going to go right into building homes using the ICF construction. Went really strong with that till 2008. And we had some economy issues down here in the US. Lumber had dropped all-time low. Steel had risen all-time high. And, concrete had doubled in price as well. And so it just really put the whole kibosh on that, right? Because I was building in California in fire-prone areas. And, with the ICF, it's a fire-resistant, seismic superior, type of construction building material. But no one at that time, it was all about the mighty dollar, and that's what it came down to. So no one was really interested. So I went back into the concrete world for a lot of years, but I did a lot of renovations. And so I got to work with a lot of different buildings and high-end construction through the years, and then circling back to my roots, which was always health and wellness. And that's just one piece I'd like to bring in, because that's how I've really adapted and crossed the construction industry to the health and wellness industry, because I understood that. And so I knew with all my past building experience that I was going to come back and build even stronger, but in a new fashion. And that was geared around health and wellness. And I had a lot of experience with like LEED, which is governed by the U.S. Green Building Council. I was on numerous LEED projects. And there was just a lot of things that the whole program made sense in one way, but on the other hand, it wasn't geared around health. And there was just a lot of behind the scenes things that just I was not in alignment with. But however, it inspired me. So when I knew I was going to come back into construction, I'm like, I'm going to recreate my own certification. But my certification is not going to be based around green, eco-friendly building. It's going to be strictly around building for performance and health. And so
let me jump on that one, Brian. So just to delineate here, this is not about green homes.
Yeah.
Right. This is about healthy homes. So it's not about.
There's a big difference.
There's a difference between feeling good about yourself and actually feeling good living in your home.
Absolutely.
So did you have some kind of, I don't want to call it an epiphany, but was there something that happened to you personally? Like you and I got introduced by a gal by the name of Lauren Rede. I hope I pronounced your name right, or she's going to kick my ass.
I know. Yeah.
And she's all about the Healthy Home Institute, I think, or the home biology.
Building Biology Institute. Yeah, that's we met through the Building Biology Institute.
And so that's how the dots connected with you and me, because she said, hey, you got to talk to this guy because he's actually implementing as a builder the stuff that I've been teaching. Now, from her perspective, she actually was ill, like really, really sick. Yeah. And then through a whole series of events, cause and effects, she realized that it was because of the home she was in, be it outgassing and all the different things. Yeah. Did you have a situation like that in your life, or you were already cognizant of the fact that something just isn't right about the way we're putting homes together?
No, believe it, I wish that was my story to like, oh, okay, hey, we got to build homes better. It was that epiphany came after the realization because I was into the health and wellness, right? And my story is a little bit different. I work with a lot of clients and colleagues that their story is, it was mold illness or some kind of a, environmental impact that really led them to like building biology or, some kind of environmental, certifications, right? Indoor environmental professionals, so on and so forth, right? So a lot of people have a similar story like that. My story was different, but it has an interesting twist to the end. I raced Ironman. I was a pro mountain bike racer. I was very athletic, right? And I was big into this whole biohacking scene. And it's basically you're bio-optimizing your health and performance, going way beyond, a Western approach of medicine and really diving deep into integrative, functional medicine practices, right? Well, through that, I'm like, hey, I just want to be on the podium. I want to operate my 3 companies. I'm going to put in my 40 hours a week. I'm going to run my 8 employees and I'm going to be on the podium every weekend, I was just pushing it from both ends. Well, come to find out, working with functional and integrative medicine, and I think that's a big takeaway for the audience as well too, to understand that, like kind of the not a conventional approach to Western medicine, right? Let's get to the underlying root cause, and that's what we're doing here, right? But come to find out, with all these test reports, my mold and my toxicity reports were just off the charts, like higher than like even people that have been exposed that are sick, but I just wasn't having the symptoms because I ate well, I slept well, I recovered well, but I was a ticking time bomb, and that was finally when I realized. So when I really dove deep into this, 10 plus years back, longer than that even, and I'm talking from this whole self-optimization point, I said, man, people are talking about air purification. We're talking about circadian lighting systems. We're talking about EMFs, exposures, environmental exposures, mold within the home. And that was the epiphany. That was, I'm like, wait a minute. I was already building performance homes. Now I'm going to base it around health. And that's, boom, the light bulb went off. And I researched high and low before I launched Senergy360 because I wanted to see what was out there. Like, am I an outlier? Am I blazing the trail to something new here? And at the time, don't get me wrong, there's, a lot of green builders, a lot of eco builders, a lot of solar passive, different technologies, earth ships, straw bale homes. I mean, it's all out there, but in my opinion, everybody kind of stayed more specific to like a certain style. It wasn't like full. They weren't looking at EMFs. They weren't looking at mold, the environmental impact.
Was it fair to say that they're looking at, let's say, the composition of the home? So that they're looking at the ease of build, That's part of it. Efficiency of build, if you want to call it, because we've got this shortage of labor. So they're looking for a way that we can get homes built quicker, more efficiently, and I guess cutting edge, because you mentioned what you were doing. The other alternative, I think it's metal sheets that they're using with insulation in between. Concrete, you mentioned as well. The 3D printed homes are coming on strong. So it seems like we're at that point now. There's a convergence of all these different technologies. Are we on the cutting edge of something that's happening here right now?
I think we're on the edge of people are waking up. I think COVID was kind of a kicker there, and as a reminder, as far as like we spend 80 to 90% of our lives indoors, whether it's in our home, whether it's in a car, on our way to work, or at work, right? And so through all the years, and now where all the science and all the research is from the home building perspective is like, you have, building, related illnesses, there's all these environmental impacts. Well, of course, COVID right now pretty much forced us into our homes. And, that's really the change to where people are like, you know what, hey, after COVID, like a lot of us still kind of work from home maybe. And a lot of people want to put emphasis on cleaning up that home environment. So I think it's more of an awakening awareness, because even since I launched Senergy360, there wasn't hardly anybody talking about healthy home building. Again, it was just all these different green terms and, whatnot. Now, today, that it's a complete new shift, and so that's great that we get to have this show here, because that's what we're doing is we're bringing it to the masses, because people are becoming educated in the environmental impacts and how it all stems from within the home. And so that's what we're doing now. We're just bringing that awareness to the builders, to the developers, to the investors, and, creating a new style of living. And that's healthy home building, which translates into healthy living.
Let's talk about that awareness, because I think the quote that I found from you, you said something around the lines of 80% of all homes are suffering from sick building syndrome.
At least.
Is that directly associated to the method of construction that's being done, the materials that are being used, or is there something else at play here?
No, it's definitely the construction. Yeah, it's the materials. It's the energy efficiency, tightening up the envelope. Basically building these plastic houses, right? Lack of engineering, if you will, just meeting minimum code requirements. So yeah, it's just that's the whole system for sure.
So where do you start? So first of all, before I ask where do you start, I would think, again, you're on the cutting edge, right? With this idea, and most builders are just happy doing what they're doing. When I think of some of the bigger builders that are, putting out 1,000 homes a year, the last thing that they want to know is, okay, we got to be doing something different, because what we have right now works, it's profitable, and we know what our return is going to be. We just know we've got the formula, right? It's like McDonald's. And then you come in on your little tricycle and say, ring the bell. There is something wrong here, that we need to be doing it differently. So with all the pioneers, as the expression goes, the early pioneers caught all the arrows. Are you experiencing the same thing? Like you're banging on your drum? Are people looking at you like the crazy kid in the classroom, or are they actually starting to pay attention?
Yeah, no, again, kind of that awareness, that awakening. When I started this, a lot of people, a lot of colleagues and connections and people in the industry, everybody knew they knew I was big into health and I was always cutting edge with everything. And so I said, hey, I have a new idea. I'm going to build healthy homes. And they're like, what does that look like? What is a healthy home?
Well, they're free range, grass fed, of course. That's what they are, right?
And it's like, oh man, Brian, you're always coming up with some kind of a crazy idea. And I says, no. This is taking all these different facets of understanding these environmental impacts. And it's just literally, and it's also crossing kind of commercial style construction and bringing it into the residential sector, because in commercial style, there is a big, push for health and, from public safety and things like that. Right. But in the residential sector, it's like they're two different industries. Right. And I'm like, no, all we're doing is we're just taking components and we're just, really value engineering the homes to this extent. Right. So everyone is like, hey, good luck. You're going to be the 0.001%, you'll find somebody out there that's into it. And I'm like, nah, man, I got a hunch on this. This just makes total sense, because again, I work with a lot of integrative functional wellness doctors into the whole scene of longevity. And, I really planted a lot out there like, hey, what do you think if I was to create homes like this? Like, you'd be a godsend, like now we can get to the underlying root cause. Or if I'm working with a client and we're giving them the pill to recover, at least they have a place to go recover in, and so at first there was and then when I really launched it into the construction industry, working with trades, professionals, other general contractors, at first there was, deer in the headlights. What are you talking about? What is this? And, fast forward 5 years later, I'm actually shocked. I do project managing all over the country, and I work with general contractors, and we'll get into it later. But, you know, because I speak the language of construction, and I just put it in simple terms of, well, hey, our electrical systems are wired by this way, by default reduces, this EMF exposure. And so I just articulate everything in a way to where contractors can understand. And so today, I'm actually pretty shocked on how open contractors are and willing to understand more of like, okay, explain more. And, if you can give us the assurance that these materials are readily available, that they don't have to be manufactured in a third world country and take months and months and months to come over on a shipping container. And it's not going to slow our production down. We're in, if you can prove this to us. And that's what I'm doing.
Despite popular opinion, I think builders by and large are really nice people, right? And
Yeah.
if they knew that what
there's a lot of good builders out there.
Yeah, if they really knew that what they're building is hurting people,
Yeah.
I don't think they'd be able to sleep nights. So I think you've come with that message at the right time, where they're respondent to what you have to say. But we're dancing around the pin here. What is the it that you're trying to say? What are the things that are either wrong with construction or wrong with materials? Like, give me 4 or 5 examples.
Yeah. Like, so I have, Senator, and we'll share this in show notes, but I have like my 12 core focuses on construction. And, the first one is the building envelope, the environment that we're building. So building close to, power lines or, exposures of power or existing, toxic waste, dumps from the 1930s, soils testing, all these types of things. Getting into the performance of a building envelope, again, kind of taking me back to just a correction. You mentioned like the metal. I don't use a lot of metal in construction. It's the composite, the insulated composite concrete form. So fast wall, for example, there's one in Canada, Nexum, that these ICCF manufacturers. That's kind of my go-to because it's a mass wall construction, so it has a high thermal value to it. It's a solid wall, so there's no cavity for water to get into and, get into the issues with mold. It's a highly insulative material. It carries just all of the benefits that I explained a little bit ago. But, getting into building envelope, and then of course, getting into understanding, design and the mechanicals, right? So when we get into like the electrical systems, it's how we're wiring the homes and the types of wiring that we're using that reduce these electromagnetic frequencies, whether it's, we're never going to get away from it, but we want to like help distance ourselves or suppress that. So we're just not constantly being bombarded, from a wiring infrastructure, getting into indoor air quality, all the mechanical systems. It's like really calculating everything out, preparing our manuals, calculating space out, figuring all the volume air of how we're going to filter that air, how we're going to ventilate, how we're going to exchange that fresh air, how we're going to deliver that air, and then, putting focus on, dehumidification, in certain parts of the region, and really taking it down to a science of, okay, hey, these are the building systems we're working with, whether it's a mass wall or whether it's a stick frame. Here's our estimated leakage, what's predicted. Here's our calculations. And now we're going to design a system that's efficient, that's going to do all these things that we talked about from an indoor air quality. So there's a lot of science that wraps into that, right? And then of course, putting a lot of focus on, and a lot of, you're hearing non-toxic low VOC paints or non-VOC paints. I mean, it's becoming common, right? And that's the same thing in all of the building aspects, whether it's from drywall to paints to lacquers to mortars to glues to thin sets, different types of materials, cabinetry, millworks, understanding, how to source, low formaldehyde, no formaldehyde, low VOC type materials. So the list just keeps getting on. We get into like water filtration and different types of lighting systems, so it's really bringing all this together, these 12 core principles that I've developed, in bringing that in together and putting that together into a specification and design. So when we're working, with the architecture and we're working with the designs or however, so we're coming in from the ground up, right? We're writing these specifications, these technologies, and these methodologies, working with the contractors, training all of the trades and understanding, hey, these are the materials, but these are why we're using these materials. So now we're actually building interest with everybody going, oh, it's interesting. I've been doing plaster all these years and I never thought about the benefits of lime and clay type materials, So it really kind of changes the mindset of the actual, down to the labor that's actually doing the install, because then people actually do it with a purpose.
So with any changes there, I have to think of the cost associated. And you and I, prior to this, we had a getting to know you meet and greet call. And I said, God bless the rich people. Right. And the reason I say that is you probably have a flat screen TV, but a average person could not afford a flat screen TV because the initial cost was so high. Right. And until they dialed in and got it right. But rich people, by and large, could afford these things. And once they were producing them, and then the manufacturers got it right, then we people on the bottom of the totem pole, we could afford these things because it was scale, right? We had production, we had scale.
Yeah.
Is that what you foresee coming right now? Because without dropping names, when you and I spoke earlier, you mentioned you've got clients in Miami, and I think the magic number was $23 or $24 million was the average price point of the homes that you're now consulting on.
And that was just for the lot.
Just for okay. So when they hired you, you just picked up grains of sand and said, "This is okay."
I like where you're going with this, because absolutely the scalability, right? So cost is a little bit of a factor, so when we're building these healthy homes and design, our costs, it's, we're not building track homes here. Okay. I'm not building tiny homes. We're building, custom homes that are, the home actually itself becomes the retreat. The home becomes the modality. And so that's going to take money to create that, and if we were to compare, a custom home, like a good builder, a good performance builder, custom home to a healthy home, integrating all of these technologies that, I just kind of brushed over lightly. Getting, now you're increasing your cost a little 20 to 30%, custom home spec to custom home spec into, well, hey, and let's talk about this. So like these expensive homes in Miami that we're designing, again, it takes an understanding. So I have an amazing client there in Miami. She understands the value of creating a healthy home. So of course, it's not, I mean, they're still conscious about the money and where they're spending the money and where they're placing the money, but they're understanding they're spending that with a purpose, right?
Well, they want quality, like we get that, right? But
quality,
this is beyond quality.
This is beyond quality.
This is about health.
Yeah.
I don't want to say prestige. Is that an element to it as well, that they can, when they're sipping their martinis, $500 each, that they can say, well, my house
they're building
has
a healthy
this.
home, they're just not sick, sipping on martinis all the time. Maybe it's something healthier, but no, just kidding. But no, I think it's really more of an education. So that, like, this particular client, she's actually investing, and we're doing a lot of healthy home projects for her across the country, not just Miami, because she's creating and building the awareness, right? She's creating these mock-ups, these, showcase pieces to get all the teams involved, to educate, to bring all the trades in, and then have a space that she can show people like, hey, this is a healthy project, right? This is why I built it. Here's the intentions behind it. And so thank God for clients like her. Like now we can start from this end of the spectrum, and then we can start to scale it from there. I'm already seeing it now. Now construction rate costs are everything's like we're still recovering from COVID in the construction industry. Some materials never came back down. Some are slowly dropping down. We'll have to see where the economy's going and everything, but cost of building is a little bit on the high side anyways right now. But I am seeing more of a mainstream, more availability for a lot of building materials where it was more of a supply chain issue before, especially during COVID. So when I'm writing my specifications, whether it's paints, whether it's drywalls, different types of building materials, glues and thin sets and mastics and sealers and paints, we're seeing that these materials are pretty readily available now.
I guess it's just a matter of being aware of them than anything, that there are alternatives to the way you've been building. There are other materials you can be using, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally just, like, again, talking about a good custom home, you're literally just swapping out one product for another product. You might be dealing from one supplier to another supplier, or you might be working a deal with your supplier to bring in these other names, But yeah, absolutely lost my train of thought.
Well, I'll pull you back onto the track here. So you mentioned COVID a bunch of times here, and
Yeah.
which was a wonderful experience on both sides of the border.
Yeah.
One thing
Yeah.
that I noticed, though, like I live in the country, literally, I call it on the corner of Lost and Nowhere in a train station. Like I love it, right? But when I was visiting friends in the city, because I was visiting friends in the city, I noticed the big G towers were going up everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Is there a correlation between 5G and you're concerned about EMFs and then
Yeah.
being safe? So is this conspiracy theory? Should I be wearing a tin hat when you and I are talking? Or explain to me how you're building a healthier home?
Yeah.
Because everybody's now wired up to the T. Like I'm wired here. I've got Wi-Fi everywhere. And I've been
Yeah.
assured, oh, it's safe. Everything's fine. The fact that your hamster died, it's a coincidence. Don't worry about it. Like, bring me back into this. Like, what do we need to know about this kind of stuff?
I won't geek out too much on our audiences here, but EMFs is electromagnetic frequencies, and there's 4 types, just really simple. So one is you have electrical field. That's just the electrons, moving through the wiring. We're not going to get away from that, right? We have electromagnetic fields that, come from big power lines, and they can also come from technology, motors, refrigerators, different appliances within the home. And of course, any potential wiring errors or a wiring infrastructure. Okay, that's an electromagnetic field. And then you have or AC magnetic field, excuse me. And then you have RF, which is radio frequency. That's the wireless transmitting devices, G, 4G, The 5G puts out a very high millimeter wavelengths. It's very powerful, but at short range. And it can penetrate through a lot of different things. G, not as powerful, but it travels much further. And then, so that's radio frequencies, whether it's a microwave, DECT phone, a baby monitor, our cellular devices, wireless devices, and so on, okay? And then we have what's known as MEP, micro surge electrical pollution, or what's referred to as dirty electricity. And it's basically line noise and harmonics that are a byproduct of different, motors and technologies, power adapters, dimmers, switches through the home. And so people that are highly sensitive can actually hear the noise and pick up on the noise. Each EMF that I just described has its nuance. One of the largest, one of the biggest studied one is the AC electrical magnetics, okay, like from power lines or from technologies in a home, because that's been linked to childhood leukemia. I mean, that, the World Health Organization, I mean, they post a lot of studies about this. I mean, these are studies that have been post 25 years. So it's not a scare tactic. It's just an aware of understanding. So what do? It's simple as this. It's when we're doing our design of our home, it's like where we're placing the appliances and where we're putting our receptacles and outlets. And do we want to have the opportunity to de-energize these outlets within a room? So now you're completely creating kind of this nature environment because now you're not exposed to these types of fields. Wireless devices, constant exposure, all of the types of EMFs are studied and they are linked to create tiredness, dizziness, fatigue. It stresses the central nervous system because there's a lot of things going on in the background, especially with wireless devices as well. There's a lot of different types of red blood cell testing that's done where they, the red blood cells, they become sticky and they kind of group together. There's all kinds of research on long-term exposure to wireless. So my goal as a builder is, and educating other builders too. And again, it's like, I personally like the mass wall because what it does is it blocks and shields those RF frequencies from coming through. But also too, what do we do inside of the home? We have our wireless devices, our cell phones, and our Wi-Fi. Hey, we love our technology, and I'm actually embracing the technology and utilizing the technology. I'm not creating smart homes here. We're beyond. We're kind of taking it back to the basics, and
You're creating the healthy homes. Like right now, you're depressing the shit out of me because my router is sitting right here.
I'm sorry. Well, hey, here's the good news. So this is where I was going. With all the different access points and the different types of wireless devices, what I do is I set my clients and my projects, or if I'm doing specifications, we just either put it on a timer, you put it on a switch, and you can turn off access points. You can tune the emission rates down on these devices. So at nighttime, let's say right now, you got all your devices on. Well, how about at least for 8 hours of your life at night, you can sleep in a complete free environment. So you just kill the power to all the wireless technologies. However, we want to get back to the basics as far as we want our security cameras, our doorbells, everything that needs to operate on some kind of an Ethernet, cable system. I went back to hardwire. So I hardwire everything, but I still do, all the wireless technologies. And so that way the clients are empowered to power on and off and cycle, and be empowered to control the environment.
So let me jump on that. At the beginning, you mentioned something about you've got a checklist, if you will, that's geared towards the builder. If you got something for the average consumer, so they can look smart when they're asking a prospective builder questions, but they can also then go through their home and affect change on their own, right? You've got something like that too?
Yeah. We're gonna put it in the show notes here. So when this airs, definitely our audiences, whether it's a contractor, a homeowner, they're definitely going to have a go-to and to understand a little bit more of this too.
Well, you got me thinking of Three Little Pigs. Okay, so I can live in my house of straw. Well, no, because there's mold in the straw. Okay, well, I can't live there. Okay, so now I'll build my little stick house. Well, no, Brian says you can't live in the sticks because the paint that you've used on the inside is going to kill you. Okay, so I'm going to go to my brick house, but no, you can't live in the brick house because it's off-gassing. So literally, I'm going to be living in a tent. No, we can't live in a tent because it's tarpaulin. I'm going to be grazing grass with my horses outside and living under leaves. Like, what's the solution here, man?
Well, that's what I've come up with. Like, we could build stick frame all day long. And as long as we value engineer how we build these wall systems, it can be a far superior structure. How we do the designs, proper overhangs, protection of the windows, from the direct elements, right? Good roof design, just good design, right? So a lot of it just comes in with just good, solid design and then value engineering of wall systems, okay? Me as a builder and what I'm educating and what I'm bringing to your audience is I'm redefining how we build mass wall construction and how easy it is.
So when you say how easy it is and you're bringing, are you putting on workshops? Are you?
We're starting the Healthy Builders Academy. We're going to start putting together workshops. But what I do is, as a contractor myself, but a project manager, I actually work with the clients and the contractors, and I do a lot of field work where I actually help get them going with layout and these types of things in the building systems, and then I train all the trades. But real quick. And I don't want to sound like I'm just so pro ICCF and mass wall construction here. However, it's a pretty interesting product because it stacks no different than a block, like a CMU concrete masonry unit block, right? But it's on steroids. It's highly insulated and carries all these great attributes. So I have found great success. We have masonry. We have masons all over the country. A good skilled journeyman masons, and when masons pick up these blocks, and even framers are like, we'll kind of work with it a little bit, because they have to, right? We got to still do all of our connections and our tie-ins from a framing perspective, but the masons love this stuff. And so, once I bring that confidence to the contractor, hey, let's bring in some journeyman masons, Once we lay our stem, once we lay, the footings to the stem, all up to 2 courses, these guys got it. As long as somebody understands, you bring in some framers, people understand the layout. We could do a 1,000 square foot home in 2 weeks and have all the walls up, ready to go, stacking trusses.
And are you still building though? Are you doing, you said you don't do tract homes, but are you doing small subdivisions? Like what's?
No, not, I call them communities.
Okay.
So there's a lot of intention in what we're creating, because we're creating like-minded people that want health and wellness, right? And so there's a lot that ties into that, right? Kind of just the outdoor, enthusiast, outdoor kind of a living scenario. So here in Tucson, Arizona, that's where I'm located. Again, I work all over the country. But as far as me as being a builder, licensed in California and Arizona, we actually have a community of homes that we're getting ready to break ground here, hopefully in the next 90 days. Several. There's actually 2. We have one on east side of Tucson, and we have one in North Tucson. One's going to be a small community of just 6 homes on some pretty large parcels, again, because we want to create a very nature, kind of a serene, quiet experience. And then we have another one in North Tucson that's going to be approximately 30 homes. And so we'll break ground in the next 90 days building the model. So I am proactively building and using everything that we're talking about today is things that I implement. And again,
so theoretically, you could invite a builder to come down and they could work. Okay. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So matter of fact, with the Healthy Builders Academy, we're going to try kind of create like kind of workshops through once we get like maybe the model built, and then we're going to build like the garage. Then we can actually have people come out, see the process, and then, walk them through the house and, show all the different trim and, how we use solar, right? How we use these inverters.
Well, it's a really clever way of doing this, because there was a guy up here locally that used to build log homes. And so he would announce, okay, here's what I'm building. You want to learn how to build a log home? You pay, right? You come up and he puts you to work. So it's awesome. Like he's getting free labor, but they're learning how to do this, right?
Yeah, and that's what we're going to do.
Okay. Now, let me dive back to your community for a second. Is there a barrier to entry because you're the CrossFit guy? Like they have to do so many push-ups? Is this, you got to learn how to play the banjo? Is there a secret handshake? Like what goes on to be able to purchase a home in one of your communities?
Well, I think definitely it's the kind of one, kind of a thing. So when I'm explaining, hey, indoor air quality, mold resistance, low EMF, non-toxic building materials, that's going to draw the right audience. Anybody that really starts to understand this, or they're opening up to this, or they say that, for example, they have the money and they're like, I need a place to heal. I need a sanctuary. That's how we'll be found, right? Because the word's going to get out there that, hey, we're building these very healthy homes.
Well, I think that part of it is there's an awareness. And I think that's what happens first. You have to have that consciousness within the public that they realize, something's just not right. Like I wake up in the morning, I feel like shit. Like what's going on here? And then they start doing their research and it's like, look, this thing that I'm sitting beside potentially can give me cancer. Oh, look, this thing over here has been off-gassing for the past 10 years. There must be a better way. And I think as that consciousness bubbles to the surface, people are going to be looking for the alternative. What is that solution? And let's go back to COVID again. As much as I hate that 4-letter word, it is a 4-letter word to me. When it happened, everybody thought that somewhere else was better. Didn't matter where you lived. Everybody was moving somewhere else. Here within Toronto, which is the major urban center, that was like ground zero. And people are moving east-west to the suburbs. Okay, you can't live in the city. You're going to die. So they move to the suburbs. Well, the people in the suburbs are going, oh, my God, we can't live here. We're going to die. So they move further east and west. People that are east and west are moving where I was to the north.
Connection.
Yeah, everywhere is better than, and so they're like looking over the fence like a cow. That must be the better field for me to shit in. That's where I'm going, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So taking this full circle right to where you and I started, your designation that you have, does that mean once you've built your home, it is going to meet to that standard? And that's what you're promoting. So kind of like, I don't want to say Ford, but that label becomes the, what am I looking for? The assurance of quality that everything has been met.
Yeah. So that's this seal right here. That was my, again, so I had a lot of background with the U.S. Green Building Council and the LEED programs and things like that, right? And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to create my own program and I'm going to have my own seal. And so through that goes a very rigorous, so whether I'm the builder or whether I'm working with a builder as a project manager, because I'm also creating a certification. And so the certification is that all of the design, all of the specifications, everything was installed exactly to specifications, right? And then what I'm doing is I monitor, I check all the boxes, I make sure everything was ordered properly, or if there was any, or if we had to change anything, was it done in equivalent, right? There's no hiding. There's no hiding if something wasn't done right on a Senergy360 certified home. And so at the end, what we do is we do all of our base testing, do all of the analysis, send it out third-party laboratories, and that home comes with a full specification. It has a full spec, just like you're buying a car, right? Like it's got all the optional features on there. And that's basically what I'm creating is like, here's all your features. Here's a guide on how to operate this home, and here's the tips and to keep it clean. And because we can build mold-free environments all we want, but if you don't maintain that environment, I mean, it's just a matter of time. A lot of people think just because I build something like this, it's going to stay that way. No, you have to have maintenance, right? So we really get into the whole maintenance factor, and then we show the test results. That's what gives somebody the quality assurance that they're moving into a.
What is it that's going to give you that official anointing of your brand, if you will, that is now something that is galvanized that people will be attracted to? Not just people, but builders are going to be, burning a path to your door to learn more about it and implement it.
Yeah, it's just the more homes that we get out there and the more homes that we build. Again, that's why I work not only as a builder here locally. Again, my goal is to manage every project that I can. And as we continue to grow and we have more demand, our goal is to work with every general contractor across the country in every state that can build for any client. And so it's going to take some time, right? I'm telling you, every time I see a new website or a new specialist or a builder that's jumping on the healthy bandwagon, it brings joy. It brings joy because I'm like, okay, cool. I'm not alone here. I guess I am. I'm not.
Well, it's one more point of light, and it just creates that awareness. And you're hoping that they're building quality as opposed to it's a way to sell houses. That's the big thing, right? So if, again, talk to me like I'm 6 years old here. So I can see pushback from the building community because they have to get their head around that there's something new. So there's that part of it. Educating the consumers because they have to realize, I don't think they have to realize that there's something wrong. They know something's wrong, but they can't articulate what it is yet.
Yeah.
And when you combine those two, is there a third element here? Are you getting pushback from local governance? Do you have to have special approval? Are there any coding issues?
Not at all. Matter of fact, the one project we talked about in Miami, the particular part of town, surprisingly, it had to be a LEED Gold certified build criteria. And so when the architect approached me on that, he says, "Hey, this is a LEED Gold. I hope your materials can make the cut sheet." I says, "You can take the LEED Gold." I says, "We're beyond platinum," because I actually used that as my slogan. It was like, I build beyond LEED platinum homes, right? Because we're beyond the certification. We're beyond the health codes and regulations, and not in a way to where it's foreign material to where they don't understand like what it is. We're just way beyond that. Everything is over engineered and is, to the norm, right? To the typical standard that I do is very over engineered. But again, that's becoming the new norm in health, for absolutely not. So like in the, building codes and permits and, whether it's a LEED Gold certified project or whatever, like we exceed that by default of what we're
So
creating.
from the builder's perspective, that's not going to be one more hurdle that they have to cross over.
No, not at all. Not at all.
All right.
Yeah. Now, again, the goal is to really bring this mainstream too. Like, I don't want to come up with something so complex or complicated and scary for a contractor to look at this going, nah, I don't want to be any part of this, because we'll just talk about, for example, I explored all the different types of methods of building systems, rammed earth. I've been hands-on building some rammed earth projects. These are 24-inch thick walls. I'm sure you're familiar with rammed earth up in your area in Canada. Straw bale homes. I review, hempcrete homes, and there's some really cool systems. I wasn't drawn personally myself to a straw bale because I didn't see that as really mainstream potential issues if it's not done right. So if I come up with complex building systems, that's not going to go so well. So
No,
the
I
goal
see.
is,
I think you're on the right path in that you're not doing this as a theory. You're not a guy on a podium saying, "Oh, this is the way it has to be done," and you're pointing your finger. So you're actually applying what you've learned into your builds. And that's the important thing, that you are building. And I'm excited about the idea that you've got these two communities, because they become, in essence, your proof of concept. And at the same
yeah,
time, as you're inviting build, because you're open to say, hey, you want to see what we're doing? Come on down and we'll show you what we're doing here. So now you get the builders excited. And then once your people actually move in, espouse the benefits of living in your home. I think that's how it all comes
yeah.
together.
We got projects in Miami. Okay, these are trailblazers that the industry understand what I'm doing, right? And so they're hiring me on as a project manager. We've got projects in Miami, Boca Raton, Jupiter, Florida, several projects in Austin, Texas, California, Arizona, Ohio.
California is the one that I thought would be all over this, because they love regulation.
Oh,
They
God,
love taxing things, and it would
yeah.
seem that what you're implementing would be a perfect way to tax people even more.
Oh man, you know, um, yeah, California is. God bless California. I lived there a lot of years, and that's where I started my building career, like we talked about. They started the Prop 65. They started all of the, air quality regulations. They're to blame for a lot of our good health standards in the building industry. So we get to blame them for that. Uh, However, it is interesting. We do have projects in California. People are big into the health and the wellness. These homes are fire resistant, and more than just fire resistant, holding up through the fire, they're going to accumulate the least amount of damage to where it's a simple repair to put this house back into order. So these healthy homes, these are performance homes. These are homes that obviously the primary focus is around health, but by default, you're going to build a performance product that's far superior. And again, people across the nation are seeing this, and that's why I'm really excited to be working with all these contractors to start getting these Senergy360 certified homes across the nation. So this isn't just Arizona or California. This is nationwide.
You need the T-shirt, brother. I mean, until you get the T-shirt, you're not legit. I don't think
I
so.
don't. Should I put the logo on the front or the back? I feel like
I'd
it
get
has
the
to go on the front.
tattoo right here so they can see you coming. That's what I would do. Let's do a lane change here, Brian. And I just want to leave building for a second. So, as an elite athlete, I mean, you've done the Ironman and stuff like that. So you've
Yeah.
punished your body, but you're obviously disciplined in what you
Top
do.
1%.
Is
Yeah.
there a congruency? So what do you do? Like, I'm an athlete too. I guess I could be considered an elite athlete because I'm 64 and I don't have a gut. So there's that part of
All
it.
right.
And I used to be a martial artist and a competitive skier, all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
when you put that all together and you're pushing yourself constantly, and now you've got this initiative, you're building, you're trying to teach. What do you do? I don't want to say ground yourself because that sounds kind of hokey, but is there some kind of ritual that Brian uses that when you get to that point you feel overwhelmed, that somehow you bring yourself back to center? Is there a ritual or something that you do?
100%. And that is, for me, is grounding, earthing, being in nature, trees. That is where I get my inspiration. Those are where I get my downloads. That's where I connect spiritually. That's where I ground into the earth. That's where I get clear communication on what I'm creating. So for me, it's very important. Matter of fact, I had to kind of unwind this whole type A mentality of being extreme in everything that I do and really get to a place of, from the heart center of what I'm creating. So now, because I keep that base fitness, I just get out into nature, whether it's on a bicycle or whether it's trail running or pool swimming. These are all very grounding, techniques and earthing. And of course, I will even take the shoes off and I'll ground to the actual earth. I'm a big believer in that.
That's part of the ritual for me is, especially where I am in a northern climate, seeing the sun, that in itself is a miracle.
Oh yeah,
Excuse
yeah,
me.
sun gazing
But I
too.
do the sun gazing early morning, grounding. When you said, I started giggling because I'm not wearing shoes or socks now, and that's part of what I do every morning is just marauding around, the field and stuff like that. And as hokey as it sounds, I think there is an energy to it that just kind of calms me down, allows me to focus, and I'm ready for the day.
So let me add that with a little bit of a twist here too. So for me, flying takes a lot out of me. So here I've elected myself to work all over the country, right? But flying takes it out of me. And I'm not talking jet lag. We're talking about moving hundreds of miles an hour in a fuselage full of radar, all the EMF exposure, right? We're higher in the sky. Now we're exposed to all of the electromagnetic frequencies, surrounding us as well, right? And with the friction, the air, the EMFs, everything, the poor air quality into a plane, that takes a lot out. So I have to have I have to be really regimented to, once I get out of the flight, take the shoes off, ground, jump into a swimming pool, go into a jacuzzi, do things to really ground myself from those flights, right? And so it's just kind of an example of that. I use that plane as an analogy to imagine if your home is kind of an environment like that. You have the poor indoor air quality, you got the EMF exposures, you've got all these synthetic materials around you, and you're living in that, So if you are, for our audience, get out, ground, get into nature, because that's definitely going to add a lot of benefit.
Brian, I want to say thank you for your time right now. We're using the analogy of the plane. We're, lined up for the runway to make our landing. Anything that we've missed that you want to cover?
Geez, we definitely need to have a part two, I feel. I look forward, Michael, to when the time is right, once we break ground on these developments, to bring you out here to Tucson, Arizona. Like I said, there's a couple developments, but this is my personal development here.
And how many homes is that, Brian? Again, you've got 2 on the go.
Yeah, there will be a total of approximately 2 different areas, and we call them communities. It'll be about 36 homes total in 2 different locations. East Tucson, North Tucson, by the way. The air quality, especially in North Tucson, there's a reason why, one, we have the land, but 2 is the air quality. North of Tucson is just fantastic. The water quality is amazing. So I knew it was just going to be a good ground to create that, to model, to bring people out to have that experience.
Okay. One last question, and this one will make you think for a bit. What would be that one question that you were wishing somebody would ask you, but no one's ever asked you that question?
Man, you got me on that one. Man, why'd you do this to me? What's the one question that no one's asked me that I wish somebody would have had asked me? Oh man, you got me on this one. Sometimes, I get put on the spot.
This is going to be our part 2, my friend.
Shoot, we're going to have to bring this in the part 2. Because, I have to give it to people. And I have a lot to learn myself, but I have surrounded myself around colleagues and clients that really ask heart-opening questions. What got you into this? What was your inspiration?
Yeah, those are all cliche. Come on, that would be on the back of the T-shirt that you're finally going to make.
I know. But it was like they're asking, man, what? We're going to finish this, and I'm going to be like, oh, that's what it was. So we'll have to bring this up in a part 2.
We'll bring it back. I'm going to cherish this moment forever, man. This is a good one.
Yes, you got me on that one.
Mr. Brian Johnson, where can they find out? Where can they find out more about you and what you do? Is there a website?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, and also too, we'll post some stuff in our show notes as a kind of a go-to takeaway checklist kind of a thing for our audience. So it's Senergy360, and that's Senergy 360.com. And you can also find me on Instagram at Senergy360 as well. It's pretty consistent. And by the way, that's source energy. So that was the source, right? So when we go out and I ground and I connect into that world, it's all source energy, right? But also too, what we're doing here is we're taking building systems and components and communities, and we're synergistically weaving everything together. And that's exactly what that logo and name represents.
Awesome. 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 All right.
Thank you, Michael.
Brian, it was a lot of fun. And when you're out there grounding and your bare footsies walking through the grass, you can ponder that question.
I'm going to ponder that question. I'm headed out on a bike ride as soon as we're finished here. And yeah, I'll have that question ready for you on the next call.
Awesome. Thanks for your time today, my friend. And I'm actually honored and thrilled that our paths have crossed. It's
Thank you.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show, and look forward to having you in person on
Take
site.
care.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Builder Straight Talk. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. Until next time, keep building smarter. This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.